£375,000? You did not mishear. That is the eye-popping salary figure that has stirred a whirlwind of debate across Scotland's public sector. It eclipses what many chief executives, professors, and even government officials earn, prompting furious whispers and head-scratching questions about how one clinician can command such a monumental sum. Are we gazing upon a case of runaway spending, or is there a crisis so deep that extraordinary measures are the only solution? Today we will dive headfirst into the story behind these astonishing pay packets, the unique pressures of working in remote territories, and the complicated reality that has led one health board to defend the seemingly indefensible. So, what exactly is going on? And how did this single figure, £375,000, become a lightning rod for public scrutiny? In this episode, we will examine the seeds of confusion, the pivotal players in the controversy, and the broader implications for a region that desperately needs widespread medical expertise but often struggles to secure it. If you have been wondering how public funds get allocated, or if the pursuit of top-notch medical generalists can truly justify such lavish compensation, you are in the right place. We will ask all the tough questions. Why are generalist-trained doctors increasingly rare? What are the glaring gaps in rural healthcare? And could bloated paychecks be the only lifeline for those out on the edges? Let's find out. Here is our roadmap for today's in-depth look. First, we will explore the heart of Shetland, where the battle for healthcare professionals has grown more intense with each passing year. We will talk about the island's particular needs and why specialists do not always fit the bill in places where it is a challenge just to get hold of certain medical technologies. Then, we will delve into how the national training programs emphasize specializations at the expense of generalist roles, tying the fate of remote communities to a tiny pool of experts willing to take on wide-ranging responsibilities. Finally, we will ask how sustainable these super salaries really are. Are they prudent investments, or do they indicate a deeper issue about recruitment and retention? Stay with us as we unravel every aspect of this tension-packed narrative. Picture this: rolling waves crashing along rugged coastlines, small ports where fishermen return with the day's catch, and a tight-knit community that takes pride in its self-sufficiency. This is Shetland, a place often described as windswept, glorious, and serene. But beneath the idyllic veneer lies a harsh reality. Shetland's healthcare system must continuously grapple with a monumental challenge. How do you maintain a fully functional hospital service with enough doctors, nurses, and specialized care for conditions that can run the full gamut from routine checkups to life-threatening emergencies? When the population is scattered across remote isles, distances can be punishing, and any serious medical complication can escalate if a patient is transported hours later rather than minutes. Traditional logic says, send in the specialists. Indeed, across many parts of the United Kingdom, specialized roles have become the gold standard. If you have a complex problem with your heart, you see a cardiologist trained to an extraordinary depth in just that discipline. If you develop a puzzling neurological condition, you consult a neurologist who has spent years focusing on that area. It is a system that has offered unprecedented quality of care for countless people living near city-based facilities, but it overlooks something crucial for the more isolated locations. Specialization works best in large, centralized hospitals with the infrastructure to support dozens of departments and advanced technical equipment. In communities like Shetland, a fractured approach featuring myriad specialists is impractical, especially when the population is small, widely dispersed, and cannot feasibly staff or fund a massive hospital with department-specific wards. Enter the generalist clinician, a master of multiple disciplines instead of just one. Generalists are the backbone of any health system that must cope with geography and staffing constraints. They move comfortably between various medical challenges, from diagnosing a sudden allergic reaction to stabilizing someone with chest pains or advising a pregnant woman about prenatal care, sometimes all in the same day. But for Shetland, recruiting such clinicians is a constant uphill battle. Why? Because the modern medical training path in the United Kingdom, as well as in many other nations, tends to nudge ambitious medical students toward specialized knowledge. From cardiology fellowships to neurosurgery residencies, the lure of high-tech, hyper-focused medicine is strong, and many see specialization as the route to prestige, cutting-edge research, and advanced treatments. What does this mean for places like the Shetland Archipelago? It means a bottleneck. The number of well-rounded generalists is not just dwindling, it is on the brink of turning into a crisis. Few doctors can or wish to maintain the broad skill set required to handle a remote hospital environment, where you might monitor emergency cases through the night, deliver babies in the early morning, and consult on complex geriatric issues by noon. Added to that is the intangible but very real difficulty of living and working at a distance from bigger cities, which can be isolating. Despite the region's natural splendor, some professionals may not find it easy to relocate their entire families to an island chain. Education opportunities for children and spousal job prospects come into the equation, as does the question of living far from extended relatives. Thus, a paradox emerges. On one side, Shetland absolutely needs exemplary practitioners with wide-ranging capabilities. On the other, it struggles to attract them without offering a premium. Enter the eye-watering salaries. One man or woman with the right training and the willingness to shoulder out-of-hours responsibilities can effectively fill a gap that, under ideal circumstances, might be handled by multiple specialists. The catch? The recruitment approach can soar into the stratosphere of compensation, as has been vividly illustrated by that £375,000 figure. It is about double what certain top positions in the local health board earn, and it is approaching the compensation levels for certain university principals with high-level duties across entire campuses. Now, many of you might be wondering, how did the public discover this salary? In a world where transparency around public funding has become almost a necessity, news outlets are digging into the nitty-gritty details of how pounds are spent, especially for senior public sector roles. When this particular research uncovered the Shetland figure, it was guaranteed to raise eyebrows. After all, how on earth could one generalist clinician be earning more than many government officials, and close to the same range as top administrators at major educational institutions? The local community, though grateful for medical care, might well ask, is this truly necessary? Meanwhile, people from the outside might wonder how this compares to big city or even rural doctors in other parts of the country. To understand the official response, we look directly at the Health Board's Director of Finance, who addresses the practical realities behind these monumental numbers. The cornerstone of his argument rests on the shortage of generalist training supply nationwide. He notes that as medical students become more specialized, the labor pool offering broad expertise shrinks. Then there is geography itself. Shetland's remote environment imposes added stress on clinicians, who often must be on call during evenings, weekends, or even holidays if a serious incident arises. The message is clear. We have to pay more to get the right people, or we risk being left with gaping holes in our service. Yes, the sum is huge, but so is the risk to public health if no doctor is available. To critics who say, surely you can just rotate multiple specialists, the counter-argument is that continuity of care depends on having the same person, or small group of persons, available. Someone who is intimately familiar with the region's specific challenges, can follow the same patients over time, and can navigate the local hospital's ecosystem. A rotating door of locum specialists might lead to scheduling chaos, diminished patient confidence, and an environment where no single doctor takes ultimate responsibility for complex cases. By contrast, a permanent generalist fosters consistency, invests in building relationships with both patients and other healthcare professionals, and is accustomed to responding to a myriad of medical concerns. That direct synergy is particularly valuable in a resource-limited setting. Now, let us unspool a broader question. Is this a bellwether for how the National Health Service might evolve in other remote regions across the United Kingdom and beyond? If Shetland is forced to shell out an extremely high salary to attract or retain generalists, perhaps other outlying communities, whether in the Highlands, certain parts of Wales, or rural corners of Northern Ireland, will follow suit. And if so, what does that mean for the future viability of universal healthcare? A system originally designed to ensure equal access across the entire population can be hampered if the availability of well-rounded professionals is so scarce that some regions must drastically stretch their budgets just to keep one hospital afloat. Pause for a moment and reflect on the scale of what is at stake. If a remote region cannot secure the right physicians, patients could face the harrowing possibility of traveling by ferry or helicopter for emergency interventions, losing precious minutes and placing additional strain on critical care networks that serve multiple scattered islands. The conversation goes far beyond one individual's compensation and into the essence of healthcare distribution. Are we, as a society, resigned to the notion that to keep basic medical services in out-of-the-way locales, we must pay a fortune? Or are there structural reforms that could encourage more doctors in training to remain generalists, perhaps through targeted scholarships, government bonuses, or reconfigured residency programs? Our protagonist, in this instance the Shetland-based generalist, is merely a figurehead for a wider saga that may shape the next decade of health policy discussions. Even within Shetland, the revelations do not stop at that single clinician's salary. It turns out there are half a dozen such figures earning well above £200,000 annually. Each presumably has a story of specialized generalist expertise, a demanding call schedule, and the kind of resilience it takes to live in a remote environment. Add in the pressure of holiday coverage, last-minute replacements when short-staffed, and the constant juggle of potential crises, and you begin to see how these roles require a high level of commitment. Yet it also raises the question of whether this approach is sustainable in the long run. Are we seeing the start of an arms race in medical salaries for remote regions? Once you break that barrier and pay one generalist an unusually high sum, you set a precedent. The next recruit will inevitably expect or even demand something in the same league. Over time, this can strain an already tight budget. Although remote areas do receive government support, every chunk of money funneled into salary expenses may reduce the pot available for capital improvements, new equipment, or expanded mental health services. The local community may wonder whether some of that money could be spent on advanced diagnostic tools or telemedicine infrastructure, bridging certain gaps that could reduce the reliance on in-person specialists entirely. Yet with resource constraints, the board faces the tough choice between purchasing high-end equipment that might see only occasional use, or ensuring there is a well-rounded professional available around the clock. If you find this discussion fascinating, and you appreciate genuine, in-depth explorations of these nuanced issues, I invite you, right now, to show a little support by giving us a quick thumbs up. It really helps us understand you value these deep dives into critical topics. That is it. Just one small gesture, but it means a lot. Back to the story. Let us examine the broader net cast by the Shetland Health Board. They are reassuring the public that they are trying their best to bring in new consultant positions through the usual routes. However, they acknowledge that the competition is fierce. Larger hospitals and city-based facilities offer their own lures, from developing cutting-edge research to forging professional pathways that can lead to prestigious appointments. Rural boards must compete on intangible elements such as lifestyle, a sense of community, freedom from intense city crowds, and scholarships for continuing education or advanced certifications. But perhaps the ultimate enticement, money, remains a potent bargaining chip. There is also a psychological element at play. The modern medical training environment places a great emphasis on specialized knowledge. In university programs, you quickly see classmates branching off into narrow fields, talking passionately about new stent materials in cardiology or pioneering therapies in oncology, and the message is that prestige lies in specialization. Scholarships, dedicated grants, and sometimes the simplest measure of all, peer recognition, can push a generation of doctors away from the broad-based approach. Once that wave is in motion, it is tough to reverse course. Which leads us to the question, would financial incentives and a cultural shift in training fix that imbalance? Suppose we introduced more robust general practice modules, gave medical students extended placements in remote regions, and highlighted the satisfaction of being that all-encompassing caregiver who can do everything from basic surgery to pediatric checkups. Over time, it might reinvigorate the pipeline of generalists. Yet, we are not there yet, and Shetland's present situation underscores the problem. Critics might argue that no public sector worker should earn such a figure, that it is morally questionable when limited healthcare budgets are stretched thin. But the clinician on the other side might respond that the job is quite literally all-consuming. Being on call is no joke. Being responsible for a broad range of emergencies not covered by specialized consultants is nerve-wracking. One has to handle the heartbreak of serious illness, the joy of patient recoveries, and the continuous burden of being the backbone of an entire community's health system. Try relocating your family to a place that has fewer recreational diversions than the city, colder winters, and more expensive supply chains, and see if you can endure that day in and day out while responding to urgent calls at all hours. Factor in professional isolation from a large network of peers in your specialty, and you can begin to appreciate why the pay might need to be extremely competitive. Zooming out to the big picture, we may ask, does the Shetland scenario illustrate a kind of microcosm for what health services around the globe are facing? As urban centers continue to expand and attract more sophisticated, technology-driven roles, remote communities are left with limited infrastructure and workforce. We see parallels worldwide, from remote parts of Canada to underserved rural territories in Australia. Everywhere, the question is, how do you keep a doctor or a small team of doctors in a place that might not see large volumes of certain complex cases, but still demands readiness for emergencies that could arise at any time? Of course, local leaders are also in the spotlight. The Shetland Health Board's chair, along with the region's member of the Scottish Parliament, have been approached for statements. But at times, officials can only do so much. They must constantly juggle budgets, negotiate with potential recruits, and weigh the fairness to taxpayers. Tensions can flare when one sees a single line item for £375,000 in compensation, yet also sees a backlog in upgrades to medical facilities or community-based care programs that might benefit hundreds or thousands of residents. On the flip side, some might champion the stance that a dedicated, highly trained generalist in a remote area is worth every penny. After all, imagine you or your loved one experiences a life-threatening event late at night, perhaps a stroke or heart attack. The difference between immediate intervention and a helicopter flight to a distant city can literally spell life or death. In that sense, paying for top-level care could be the best investment any regional health service can make. Potential outcomes become far less dire if the local team is fully capable of stabilizing patients before they are moved to a more specialized center. Such arguments do not end with the financial aspects. The ability to recruit and retain staff can also create a ripple effect throughout the community. A stable supply of well-rounded clinicians might encourage supportive services to flourish. New ambulance upgrades, better training for nurses, and the forging of specialized alliances with nearby health boards for teleconsultations. That, in turn, can boost morale among current staff, making them more likely to remain in the area, thus reducing turnover and, ironically, potentially mitigating the need to pay astronomical salaries to attract new recruits. The entire system is interconnected, and the solution cannot be approached from just one angle. If you are still with me, I suspect you find this look behind the curtain of remote healthcare realities as intriguing as I do. Now would be another great time to consider subscribing or following along, so you never miss a deep dive into stories that challenge our assumptions about public health, budgeting, and the future of essential services. That way, we can continue exploring these fascinating topics together. Moving along, let us examine how real people living in Shetland may be reacting to the news. A young parent with kids might say, "Look, as long as we have a reliable doctor at the pediatric ward, that is a relief." Meanwhile, a local fisherman might question the fairness of devoting a massive chunk of the health board's resources to a handful of clinicians, especially if he perceives deficits in occupational health services or mental health support. Possibly, community leaders are left in a tricky position, balancing the gratitude that skilled medical professionals are even available at all with the knowledge that such large salaries can draw negative attention, sometimes painting the local area as overly dependent on big pay packages. The tension is further heightened by comparisons to other publicly funded roles. University administrators, for instance, manage entire institutions with thousands upon thousands of staff, faculty, and students. The public might wonder how a single clinician receives nearly the same compensation as a principal running a large university. The question arises whether the level of complexity truly justifies the scheduling commitments. But from the health board's perspective, ensuring that one especially capable doctor can address multiple medical domains might be as vital as administering a colossal educational institution. This conversation is not just about Shetland. It resonates with many other locales that find themselves overshadowed by major urban centers. Perhaps the main question is whether the national healthcare apparatus must undergo fundamental changes. Should the system encourage a renaissance of generalism, making it a recognized specialty in its own right, complete with robust support systems and a clear path for professional advancement? Could that mitigate the necessity for extraordinary salaries while still improving coverage across far-flung areas? Meanwhile, there is no shortage of speculation on how the numbers might climb further. If the labor shortage intensifies, and if more and more generalists retire without replacements, the next wave of hires might command even higher compensation packages. The concept of a bidding war feels antithetical to the founding spirit of a public system, yet it might be inevitable unless there is a coordinated effort to address the underlying shortage. Observers from other regions monitor what is happening in Shetland to glean lessons. Will this method be validated if patient satisfaction remains high and medical emergencies are adequately handled, or will it be condemned if budget shortfalls arise? At the end of the day, the story of Shetland's top-paid clinician, featuring that monumental £375,000 salary, is more than just a sensational figure. It is a prism through which we can view an entire set of systemic challenges: the necessity of generalist skills, the tension between specialization and geographical realities, the moral debate about public funds, and the unwavering commitment to providing healthcare to isolated communities are all woven together. Wrapping things up, we see how a single salary can spark such heated debates and highlight critical fractures in the broader system. On one hand, the substantial compensation might seem out of proportion. On the other, without that pay, the region might struggle to provide essential medical care, potentially turning a scenic island paradise into a healthcare desert. The question that lingers is, will structural reforms come quickly enough to ensure that Shetland and similar regions do not have to rely on these extraordinary measures indefinitely? Until we have a definitive answer, the story remains open, capturing national headlines, provoking local and national leaders to reassess their strategies, and leaving everyday citizens debating how best to safeguard the community's well-being. Think of it this way: can you put a price on medical peace of mind? For some families, especially those in remote areas, that peace of mind is something they cannot imagine living without. But for policymakers and the taxpayers who foot the bill, £375,000 is not a trivial line item. It is a glaring symbol of the crossroads at which modern healthcare stands. Thank you so much for sticking around to uncover the layers behind this astonishing salary and the far-reaching dilemmas it represents. The conversation is far from over, and as we watch how people on the islands respond, how the health board adjusts, and how medical insiders address the underlying shortage of generalists, we get a front-row seat to the evolving shape of public health care. In a world where specialized medicine continues to expand, it is little pockets of generalist excellence, especially in remote places, that might become the unsung heroes ensuring no community is left behind. What do you think? Is the benefit equal to the expense? Or do we need an urgent recalibration? Only time and multitudes of local decisions will tell.